Bryce Harper just picked up a very important milestone in his Phillies career the other day, reaching 1,000 hits as a Philadelphia Philly. So in this video, I'm going to talk a little bit about Harper's tenure as a Philly, comparing it to his time as a National, and talking about how well he's played recently. So in his time as a National, of course, this is where he rose to stardom, young player coming up through the system, you know, highly regarded. Obviously, at age 15, he was on the cover of Sports Illustrated, so the expectations were always high for Harper, and he didn't fall short of them. As a National, his career, he had 279 with a 900 OPS, mashing 184 homers. Of course, he had that 2015 NL MVP campaign, which is his best season as a big leaguer by far, tallied in near 10 WAR that season. And he was a six-time All-Star as a National, a Silver Slugger, of course. But the biggest discrepancy between Harper as a Philly and Harper as a National is postseason success, of course. You know, Harper as a Philly in the postseason, I'll dive into that, but he's one of the greatest hitters of all time in the postseason since he's gotten here. But just going over his Nationals tenure, that 2015 campaign was one of the best seasons we've seen from a player. 1,100 OPS on the season, just doing it all, really. Was a solid fielder. But as a Philly, he's put together a really good career. He's known, I'd say, if he retired today, went into the Hall of Fame a couple of years, he'd be known as a Philly. He'd go in as a Philly. And his numbers with the club, he said he has the same average, 279, 908 OPS, so slightly higher, 205 homers. He also has an MVP here in 2021. The team did not make the playoffs that season, but Harper was just so good that, of course, he won. He has that NLCS MVP, which really cemented his legacy as a Philly. A three-time Silver Slugger here. And the postseason numbers, as I alluded to, he is 311 with a 1090 OPS. And, you know, Harper as a National, he really didn't have many signature moments. Of course, you know, you have the home run derby at home in Nationals Park that he won. But as a Philly, he's just had so many great moments. You know, you look back at the NLCS, of course, swing of his life homer to put the Phillies into the World Series. You look at that first home game of the World Series where Harper, you know, hits that homer off Lance McCullers, and it was just electric. Of course, even going back to 2019 when the team, you know, was disappointing, he hit that walk-off grand slam against the Cubs, which is another great signature moment for him. The team has let him down, obviously. There's no other way to put it. He's been one of the greatest postseason performers in the history of the game as a Philly. You know, near 1,100 OPS in October is absolutely ridiculous. It's video game numbers. Every season, you just count on him in the postseason to deliver. It doesn't matter, you know, how bad he's going up until the postseason. If he's having, you know, a down year by his standards, you just know that when October rolls around, Bryce Harper's going to be playing his best baseball. And, of course, the Nationals won the World Series after he left, and, you know, a lot of people view that as a stain on his legacy. But there was just a lot of things in play there. They spent a lot of money on other guys. You know, a couple of guys had career years. Soto was coming into form. So I'm not of the belief that because Bryce Harper left, that was the monkey off their back to finally win a World Series. That's just not the case. It's very coincidental. He was their best player, and him leaving didn't magically make them a World Series team. But as a Philly, of course, you look at 2019, the team, you know, they brought in JT Realmuto, they brought in a lot of these guys, Zach Wheeler, but, you know, they just didn't have those other pieces. You know, Hoskins was good. They just couldn't put it together. The bullpen blew a lot of games those years. The pitching staff wasn't what it is today. You know, obviously the rotation has been a strong point of this team over the past few seasons. And 2021, like, they had Wheeler and Nola, but they didn't have anyone else really. I mean, Ranger Suarez was good, but just back end 2021, they came into the season with Chase Anderson and Matt Moore as their 4 and 5 starters. But that was a year they wasted of Bryce Harper playing MVP baseball. I mean, he won that MVP. Definitely deserved it, of course. And when you have a guy putting up a season the way he put up that year, and you still have Nola, Wheeler, you got some of these guys. Hoskins was here, obviously. JT. It's kind of just embarrassing that the team missed the playoffs that year, but nevertheless, Harper has still been. Obviously he hasn't had that same MVP campaign since then. That was just a really amazing year for him, but he's still one of the best hitters in baseball as a Philly, and you know we'll talk about now how he's played recently. He's played close to that level of late, and he's been the Bryce Harper of old. And of course, we'll get into why that is. But since they got Luis Ariz, he's obviously played a lot better. He had a rough July. He hit 172 with a 624 OPS. Just a rough month for him. Schwarber wasn't really good in July. The team kind of just was stale in July. He had Bryson Stott was probably their best offensive player through that time, but Harper's kind of reclaiming his title. So this season, right now, he's on a 28-game on-base streak, which is still active, and that's the longest of his career. So in the last month or so, he's just been getting on base at a high level, and he's got a 140 WRC plus this season, which is up there with some of his past seasons. Obviously, it's not the 170, the 180 of his prime years, but he's still just an elite bat. This month he's in 329. He's got a 510 on base percentage, a 1063 OPS, and really the biggest turnaround that you can point to is the acquisition of Luis Ariz. Since then, he's got a 185 WRC plus, which puts him 85% above league average over that time. And he's walking around 27% of the time, and he's only striking out 18% of the time, which is just, obviously, these are just crazy numbers. Walking 27% of the time, something, pretty unsustainable, but he's leading the league in walks, which he hasn't done in a while, and he came into the season talking about how he wanted to cut down his chase, he wanted to walk more, and he's done just that. I mean, he's been one of the best walk guys in the league, obviously leading the league, but just the at-bats he takes a lot better than in previous years where, you felt like he was trying to do too much at the plate, and a lot of that is because of who was hitting behind him, which was basically nobody. So he felt more pressure to do something. I think the Luis Ariz acquisition, though he's not a guy who's going to hit 20, 30 homers and, slug the ball, but he's a guy who will put the ball in play and drive in runs. So it takes a lot of pressure off of Bryce, and I think that's why you can see him. Obviously, he turns that switch, and now he's able to walk more. 510 OBP this month is ridiculous. So he's getting on base. He's slugging the ball too pretty well. And Bryce has just been Bryce of old here. And Bryce is in the 98th percentile in batting run value this season. So he is one of the best hitters in baseball by that metric, according to Baseball Savant. And of course, defensively, he hasn't been great. Running the bases, his value is pretty low. But really just in the field, a lot of people have been talking about it. He moved to first base following Rhys Hoskins' injury. The Phillies thought it would be a way to preserve his career a little bit. They didn't expect him really to be like a Gold Glover there, but his first full season there, he was a Gold Glove finalist. He played really well there defensively, but since then, it's kind of been a steady decline. Not really sure why he's fallen off a little bit, because he was really good in his first full season there. As I mentioned, a Gold Glove candidate, position he'd never played before, and you kind of assume that the only way to go from there was up. And I think the Phillies really banked on that as well, because they didn't. He has said all along that he'd move for a first baseman, he'd move back to the outfield. That would help the lineup, but they haven't done that because they are comfortable with him at first base. They thought he would play good defensively. They thought that it would, remove some injury concern. But at the end of the day, besides throwing the ball, I think Harper's much more likely to get hurt at first base. He's had several instances of guys running into his arm at first base. You obviously have concern about, ankle injuries, getting stepped on, stuff like that. So I don't think injury-wise, it saves your career at all. I think honestly it's worse than the outfield. Of course, the outfield you're doing a lot more running and stuff, but it's more taxing on the body to play first base, in my opinion, because of that risk of, it happens all the time. There are guys running to first base and there's collisions, you know. So I ultimately thought he should have been an outfielder, and because you can easily find a good right-handed first baseman, right-handed hitting first baseman. Pete Alonso would have been a good addition, and certainly someone Bryce Harper would have moved back to the outfield for. But ultimately, it's Luis Ariz who they make that move for, and he was terrible defensively, one of the worst in the game at first base, and in the outfield he's hasn't been good, but he's been serviceable out there. So the Phillies needed that offensive boost of Luis Ariz, and although I'm not sure he was the perfect guy for it, Harper ultimately is back in the outfield, and like I said, he's been solid there. You're obviously not expecting him to be a Gold Glove caliber player, but the end goal was to get a bat to hit behind him that would deepen this lineup, bring a different approach to this lineup. As I've mentioned in previous videos, this is a team that in the postseason is prone to chasing, is prone to a lot of swing and miss, not putting the ball in play. And since the Luis Ariz addition, Harper's been going better. Just everybody has been, their approaches have been better besides Trey Turner, of course. Trey Turner has been one of the worst players in baseball, and just the fact that, and we could pop his baseball savant page up here, just you look at the numbers, just horrible. He doesn't do anything well besides run the bases, and you don't pay a guy $300 million to run the bases well. But other than him, the Ariz addition has seen the team, be one of the best offensive teams in baseball this month, and it's been led by Bryce Harper because, yeah, Ariz has been impactful to indirectly. Harper has been just carrying this offense this month. Bohm has been really good since we got Ariz. Stott's fallen off a little bit, but he's been really good over the past couple months. And obviously, he's a guy who's going to work counts and walk a good bit as is, but you just look at how the lineup has performed as a whole since the addition of Ariz. It's like a whole new team, and that's kind of why that move gives you a little bit of hope for the postseason. But ultimately, I still have concerns that this team will do the same thing they do every year in the postseason, where they just fall apart, and it's more the same. Of course, you won't have Nick Castellanos chasing sliders away anymore, but I think Bryce Harper will have just another great postseason run as always, because in the past few years, he's had Alec Bohm batting cleanup in the playoffs. Now he's got Luis Ariz. He's walking more. Obviously, he doesn't want to walk. He's okay with walking, but he wants to do damage with his bat, and he'll do that. He'll get his chances to do that. But the addition of Luis Ariz behind him in the postseason is going to pay dividends for this team. Obviously, like I mentioned, Luis Ariz isn't going to blow you away with power, but the concern for the opposing pitcher of him putting the ball in play, ripping a single with runners on, of course you have to get Trey Turner going at the top of your lineup if you want that, but just the ability for him to pose that threat behind Harper will make Harper a lot better. So Bryce Harper has been playing back to his prime level recently. The Phillies will need him. Of course, they can't go anywhere without Bryce Harper playing this way in the playoffs. I do believe that he will elevate his game. He had a little bit of a down year in the postseason last year. I do think Bryce Harper will elevate his game. The keys now for the Phillies are Zach Wheeler to turn his season around. They need to continue with this plate discipline, this high walk rate, as a unit. And I think if they can do those things and let Harper do his thing, that this team could be in good shape come October.